He's one of the few. He's one of the proud. He's a Marine. And he's our guest on this morning's Carolina People. Meet him coming up next. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Bell & Bell, Buick, Pontiac, GMC at the intersection of Highway 9 and 31 here at the Big Red Bell. We're focused on the U.S. Marine Corps and Part 2 of Lieutenant Colonel Joe Paschall of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Good morning.
Morning, Greg.
Lieutenant Colonel Paschall, yesterday you said it's okay if we called you Joe. Are you still okay with that?
I suppose so.
I know you're heading back to Iraq this weekend, so we're only going to keep you here 30 minutes. So you're heading out of Lejeune.
Yes.
Wow, you were sharing yesterday, that's a heck of a trip back, a 3 or 4 day trip back.
Oh yeah, it's pretty long. I think they design it that way so that you almost look forward to getting to what you call home in Iraq once you get there. Otherwise, it wouldn't be too much fun. But you actually look forward to that little bed in Iraq in your own little home.
That little bed in Iraq. What are some of the things that, I know there's a lot of things you shared yesterday and off camera, a lot of things you can't talk about clearly, particularly with this airing on the internet, to go online this weekend. And so there's a lot of things you can't talk about, particulars over there, but there are things you can do and can't do. I know the director had asked you a question about can you have a beer on the flight back on any of the layovers, and
yeah, there's no alcohol. It's a pretty ascetic monk-like existence over there. Of course, no sex, no alcohol, no pornography, and those are all things that we've acclimatized our military to sort of be a little bit more accommodating of the culture in which we're coexisting over there, the Middle Eastern culture. This really goes back to Desert Storm. Even when I was in Desert Storm, there was no alcohol, but it also gets back to the essence of some of the problems we had in Vietnam. When you're in stressful situations like in Vietnam and like currently exist in Iraq, I think a lot of the troops would choose to sort of lubricate themselves at the end of a tough, stressful day by hitting a bottle. Were a bottle available, or drugs, or God forbid anything else you got available, because a lot of our Marines and soldiers over there are in they see some pretty rough things during the course of a day. Out on patrol, you might have some friends killed or something. They're in a stressful environment. Even the staff, staff weenies like myself, fairly stressful days. And just about every day, at the end of the day, I commonly think I could really use a drink.
Right.
And if I had a drink, I probably would have one or two. And it's probably better that we don't have alcohol at all, because I could use a drink, but I don't have one. And so at the end of the 6 months or a year or whatever, you just come back a little cleaner of your vices, and you learn how to cope with stress without alcohol or anything else. So yeah, maybe it's a positive thing.
That's a great point.
It's still kind of rough.
That's all the services, though.
Yes,
all the
actually,
services that are in.
As I understand it, it's a theater thing within the Central Command area of responsibility, which is the entire Middle East. So even like naval forces in Kuwait, they will only be able to drink on the bases down there in Kuwait at the port. Mm-hmm. But we, can't drink anywhere in Iraq at all.
Mm-hmm. Joe, you shared with us yesterday 20 years now direct in the Marine, 20 years next June. You will have served in the Marines for 20 years, not counting the 4 years that you shared yesterday of ROTC there at Duke while you were a student. We didn't talk any at all. I wanted to have you share for a few minutes about rugby. You were a rugby player there at Duke? Were you actually competitive, a rugby player there?
Well, I don't know. It depends on your frame of reference as to competitive. I did compete, sometimes better than others. But, rugby's something I picked up throughout the years. I actually was playing up until a couple of years ago. Only reason I stopped is because now, at the advanced age of 40, it's harder to compete against 20-year-olds, when you're 40, even in rugby. When I was up in D.C. Most recently, I left there in 2005, they have what's called an old boys rugby league, which you have to be 35. So
right.
Everybody in the entire league is over 35. For me, that was like being 18 again, because for so many years I've been competing with 20-year-olds
right.
that when all of a sudden I'm competing with 35, 40, 45-year-olds,
yeah.
all of a sudden I'm one of the faster, stronger ones again.
Yeah.
And it was great. But then you come back down to Camp Lejeune, where I'm currently stationed. They don't have an old boys league, so the only option would be to play with the base team, which again is the 20-year-olds. And I could still do that. And I've competed at that level before. I find that I can still compete at that level just fine, but it'll take me a week or two to recover, whereas it used to take a day or two when I was 20 years old.
Right.
And you get the point of diminishing returns. How much is it really worth to compete for that hour and a half on the rugby field? And I got to pay the price. Plus, having 4 small kids, as my wife commonly reminds me, my job is to sit on the sideline at their games and not play in my own while they watch me. And so she's had to remind me of that the past few years, because when I was playing up in D.C., my son would be the water boy for my team, and then I coached his rugby team. He was
you're
playing.
Kidding, Joe, Little Joe, you call him Little, or Joe, or you got a lot of nicknames for him. That's right. Yeah. He's playing rugby as well.
He did. He played 1 year. They don't have, in big metropolitan areas like D.C. or maybe Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and Atlanta even, they have a lot more demand for the niche sports like rugby, and so they actually had rugby for kids as early as 6 to 8 years. Really? And of course, they have rugby leagues going as late as like 50-year-old rugby leagues.
Right.
Now you get back to Jacksonville, and there's no rugby for kids, and it's only one rugby team in Jacksonville, North Carolina. That's the Camp Lejeune Misfits, the base team. So my son can't play, and I can't really play unless I'm willing to get on the field with the young guys anymore.
I can't really picture the sport, Joe. Is it? It's kind of a mix of football. Are you wearing helmets or pads or anything?
No. The funny thing about rugby is it actually evolved from soccer back in 1823 over in Rugby, England. There was actually a school called the Rugby School. That's thus the name rugby. But there was this one guy, William Webb Ellis, who decided, with a total disregard for the sport, to pick up the soccer ball and run with it. And then people thought that was a good idea. And then people, once you pick the ball up and run with it, other people tackle you. They developed it into what was called the rugby game. And then it just became called rugby, named after the School of Rugby, England. And when we were stationed in England, I had the opportunity to make the pilgrimage back to the rugby players' mecca of Rugby, England. Right. And I stood on the original rugby field and went to the original rugby shop where the first rugby balls were made. Had Little Joe's picture taken in front of the first rugby field.
That's great.
Yeah, it was like making a pilgrimage back to Mecca. But I intend on playing again. If when I retire, if I happen to get take a job at a larger metropolitan area, like even Charlotte or something, where they have old boys, rugby teams. I'm not really going to play again, with 20-year-olds, but I'll play in over 35 in a heartbeat, because if you stay in shape, through the years, it's easy enough to continue playing against guys your own age.
Sure. You've got a son. You've also got 3. You and Sue have 3 girls as well.
Oh, yes.
What's that like? You and Joe are outnumbered in the household 4-2. Well, and then your mom's around a lot. It's 5-2.
Oh, yeah. Well, the dog's a girl, too. So, yeah, she weighs her vote in there. But, son and I, we have to stick together. We say that the 2 Joe's votes count, for 6 or 7 women's votes. So that's kind of how we try to play that card occasionally. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work often, yeah. You and Sue have been married now. I remember, obviously, Rob and Luke and I, and even Dad took part in your wedding. We still have those pictures all over the place. I think it was the first time the 4 Everett guys were together in tuxedos, Joe. Yeah. We love those pictures. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was in the early 90s?
13 years ago, 1994.
94. That's exactly right, 94. That's amazing. It was in the fall of 94.
Yeah.
That's tremendous. Y'all have a thing coming up soon, 14 years or 13 years.
Yeah, 13th year anniversary. Unfortunately, I won't be there for that one, but I think Sue's kind of gotten used to over the years. I'll miss the occasional anniversary being gone somewhere.
Right.
But I'm hoping after this next year, I'm hoping to be there for all the rest of them.
All the rest of them.
And birthdays as well. Spending a year in Iraq. I think one of the roughest things about it, outside of just being away from the family, is miss everybody's sports season and everybody's birthday and every holiday.
Right.
Back in years previous, most of my deployments were 6-month deployments.
Sure.
And you can always tell yourself, okay, well, I'm going to miss the summer, but I'll be home for Christmas. Or Daddy's going to miss Christmas, but Daddy will be home when the pool opens.
Right.
For a year, when you're gone a year, there's nothing you can say. You're just, okay, Daddy will be home next year this time.
That's right.
Sorry I'm missing everything for a year. But
oh, Joe, that's the same way for so many in the services.
Well, and a lot of folks in the Army, are actually doing 15-month tours, some a little bit longer, and that's pretty arduous, especially for some of our folks over there being reservists, and they really whereas, arguably it's my job to be going over there and doing these kind of things as an active duty Marine. Our reservists really are kind of, they sign up as weekend warriors, a lot of them, and they really never see themselves deploying for a year and a half away from their families, because they actually have to leave their career to go play soldier somewhere, whereas my career is over there with me. So I
can't even fathom that, Joe. You're
me
right.
either, but I served with them enough over the years where you kind of you learn to empathize. You think, gosh, these guys, it's a whole different set of dynamics for them.
Right. Very difficult, and I'm glad you highlighted that, because there are a heck of a lot of folks that give up a lot to be able to experience that and to serve their country. For you, over the 19 years, Joe, you shared yesterday 3.5 years at Pendleton, obviously much of your time at Lejeune. But for you, you have experienced overseas quite a bit. What are some of the highlights over that 19-year tenure? Any of them that stick out? I know Kosovo, I think you've been to a couple times, Bosnia. Any memorable stories here on a Friday morning?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, plenty of them, both good and bad, memorable stories. But, over the years, either I've been really unfortunate or very fortunate to hit most of the high points. I came in '88, and there hadn't been too much going on up to that period. But then, Desert Storm hit right away, and so I was in Desert Storm as a lieutenant. And then within a year of that, I went back and we were off the coast of Yugoslavia when that all collapsed in '92. The next year, I was headed to Somalia, and then to Rwanda to do the evacuation of our embassy there. And then the year after that, I was headed back to the Gulf. Saddam Hussein was doing more saber rattling, and then after that, I was in Bosnia in '97, Kosovo in '98, and then took a little bit of a hiatus, go to school for about a year, and then back into Kosovo in 2002, Horn of Africa, and then Iraq 2003, and now this is my second trip back to Iraq. So been fairly busy on your tax dollars over the years. Yeah, I think the most interesting of my deployments was probably Kosovo.
Really?
In '98, because whereas most of my deployments, you're standard, you go somewhere with a group of Marines as part of your unit, wearing military uniforms, and there's certain understanding of what your environment and what the dynamics will be when you deploy as part of a Marine force. In Kosovo, I deployed as part of a State Department mission, which meant that I was not in uniform, not armed. I was wearing civilian clothes the entire time.
Really?
And it was interesting.
You said not armed. Were there ever instances where not being armed caused some level of fear beyond?
I'm not sure. Most Marines would say, it's horrible. You need to be armed if you're in the situation, because I was in the middle of the Civil War in '98 between the Serbs and the Kosovars. But in retrospect, there were a lot of situations I was in that, had I been armed, my armament would have been a 9mm service pistol. That's what an officer would carry. I was a major at the time. And, if 10 other guys have AK-47s trained on you, and you draw a 9mm pistol, you just got yourself killed. Whereas if you're disarming and disarmed in civilian clothes, and they've got AKs on you, you're not threatening to them. And so I don't know. I don't know if it made me feel more uneasy being unarmed or less uneasy.
Yeah.
But I think it's an accurate statement to say that had I been armed in that situation, I probably would have gotten myself killed.